The sun rose pale over the fortress, brushing the towers with a silver light. Ilara stood by the window, the pendant heavy against her chest. Her reflection in the glass seemed unfamiliar. No longer the timid girl branded by shame, but someone who had begun to see her own worth. King Kale had not spoken much since the storm, but his eyes watched her constantly, like a hawk observing its prey or perhaps something gentler. He was testing her still in ways both subtle and severe. Each day brought new challenges, and Ilara met them with growing confidence. The library, once a place where she fumbled among dusty scrolls, became a refuge where she solved riddles and uncovered knowledge. The gardens, which had seemed hostile, responded to her touch as though she had awakened a magic hidden within them. The court began to notice. Whispers spread like wildfire. The shamed girl was learning, growing, and proving herself. Some nobles scowled, others were intrigued. But Kale remained silent, observing her triumphs and failures alike. One evening he summoned her to the balcony. The sky was dark, stars scattered like diamonds, and the wind carried a chill. "You have changed," Kale said softly, almost to himself, not in the body but in spirit. "You carry yourself differently now." Ilara felt her heart skip. I try, my lord. I try to be worthy." Kale's lips curved slightly, and for a moment the fearsome king softened. "Worthiness is not given, Ilara. It is earned through courage, wisdom, and heart. You have begun to earn it." For a moment silence wrapped around them, heavy yet comforting. Ilara wanted to speak, to ask him what he saw when he looked at her, but words failed her. Instead, she let the night speak. Then the first real test came. A messenger arrived with news of rebellion in the northern villages. Bandits had joined forces with rogue nobles, threatening the people and challenging Kale's rule. The king's eyes, usually calm, darkened with stormy intent. "You will come with me," he said. Ilara's heart raced. This was beyond any task she had faced, beyond any library puzzle or garden trial. She had been brought to the fortress as shame, yet now she was being invited, no, commanded to stand beside the king in danger. Fear rose, but so did a strange exhilaration. The journey to the northern villages was harsh. Snow fell in thick, cold flakes, the wind cutting through cloaks and armor. Kale rode with unmatched skill, his presence a force that steadied everyone around him. Ilara followed closely, learning quickly, observing his strategies and finding ways to aid him with her insight. At one point, they camped near a frozen river. The fire crackled, and Kale, unusually quiet, stared into the flames. Ilara hesitated, then spoke. "Why do you carry so much burden, my lord?" she asked softly. "You are feared by many, yet you are still alone." Kale looked at her, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "Alone is different from lonely," he said. "I am haunted by mistakes, by the weight of the crown. Many fear me because they sense the darkness I carry." Ilara's heart softened. "And yet you still fight for them. For the people." His gaze lingered on her, searching. "And you, Ilara. You surprise me. You do not fear me in the way others do. You see something beyond the shadow." Her cheeks warmed. She did not know how to respond. Words seemed too small for the swell of emotion rising in her chest. Instead, she watched him, feeling a bond forming in silence, a connection neither fully understood but both could sense. The following days were a test of courage. They arrived at the villages to find chaos. Bandits had taken hostages, and the villagers cowered in fear. Kale moved like a storm, commanding, decisive, yet his trust in Ilara's advice grew evident. She suggested ways to protect the innocents, strategies that blended her keen observation with his strength. Together they turned the tide. After the battle, the villagers looked at Ilara not as a shame but as a protector, a guide. For the first time she felt the weight of worthiness, not as something to be claimed, but as something she had earned through action. That night, Kale took her to the fortress balcony once more. The sky was quiet now, the stars clear, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of snow and pine. "You have done well," he said, "more than I expected. You are not just brave, you are wise, you are extraordinary." Ilara's heart thumped wildly. No one had ever called her extraordinary. Her voice shook. I only wanted to survive." Kale's hand brushed hers, a touch light yet commanding. "Survival is the first step. But now you must choose. Will you stand beside me, not as shame, but as something more? Will you claim the strength I see in you?" Tears prickled her eyes. The girl who had been sold as shame, who had hidden in shadows her whole life, felt a new power awaken. Yes, she whispered. I will stand beside you. Kyle's lips curved, but there was no mockery, only recognition. Slowly, deliberately, he drew her closer and placed a hand over her heart. Then rise, Ilara of Dunwyn. You are no longer what they called you. You are my queen. The word struck her like lightning. Her breath caught. She had imagined power, respect, even love, but to be called queen, to be acknowledged by the Alpha King himself. It was more than she had dared dream. The court was astir the next day. Nobles whispered, some in disbelief, some in envy. Kyle stood at the center of the hall, and Ilara, dressed not in silks or jewels but in the simple strength of her new self, walked beside him. No one could deny the bond between them, the unspoken understanding that she was now his equal in courage, wisdom, and heart. Yet, even as the kingdom celebrated their union of power and trust, shadows lingered. Rumors of the curse that had haunted Kale persisted. Dark forces stirred, unseen, whispering threats that neither sword nor strategy could fully banish. Ilara felt it too. In the quiet of the night, when the hallways were silent and the candles flickered, she sensed eyes watching, winds carrying whispers of danger. But now she did not tremble. She had learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to stand in it. And she would stand beside him, not behind him, and not beneath him. One evening, as they watched the moon rise over the frozen northern lands, Kale turned to her, his expression unreadable yet soft. We have faced the first battle, he said. But the war is not over. Darkness still lingers. Will you face it with me? Ilara took his hand, feeling the warmth, the strength, and the unspoken promise in his grasp. I will, she said. Whatever comes, I will face it with you. Kale nodded. Then we are bound, he said quietly. By fate, by choice, and by a bond that no one can undo. The fortress seemed to breathe around them, the walls no longer menacing but protective, as if acknowledging the union of strength and courage between them. Outside, the stars shone brighter, the night carrying a sense of possibility and renewal. Ilara realized for the first time that shame was not her fate. The world could try to define her, but it could not take away what she had claimed. Her courage, her heart, and the recognition of her worth. Kale's eyes met hers, and in that gaze she saw not a king, not a master, but a man who had been as haunted as she once was, yet who now faced the future with her by his side. Together they would not only rule, but transform the kingdom, banish the shadows, and carve their own destiny. And somewhere deep in the castle, in the quiet of the night, the first signs of the old curse stirred, testing them, but also reminding them that together, no darkness could break the bond they had forged. Ilara pressed the pendant to her chest, feeling the steady pulse of hope and power. She was no longer shame. She was queen. She was strong. She was seen. The story of the girl who had been sold as shame had ended, but the story of the woman who would stand beside the Alpha King was only beginning. End of Part 2. Emotional Hook. The moonlight glimmered on the frozen halls of the fortress. Kale and Ilara stood side by side, hands entwined, knowing that the world outside was still full of shadows. But for the first time they were ready. Together they would face whatever came, their bond unbreakable, their hearts fearless. And as the wind whispered through the towers, carrying the promise of trials and triumphs yet to come, Ilara finally understood. She had been claimed not as shame, but as destiny. Ilara walked with her head low, the cold wind tugging at her heavy cloak. The village roads were empty, save for the black crows perched on the stone fences, their beady eyes watching her as if they knew the shame she carried. She had been called many things in her life, clumsy, ugly, worthless. But today her family had done something far worse. They had sold her, not to a noble home, but to the mysterious Alpha King who ruled the northern lands. A man whispered to be both cruel and cursed. Her stepmother had smiled as she handed her over, her lips curved with satisfaction. Remember, child, she had said, you are nothing but shame. Make yourself smaller and perhaps you will survive. Ilara had wanted to scream, to strike, but she had no strength left for rebellion. Only the bitter taste of betrayal stayed in her mouth. The road to the north was long, through forests where shadows moved as if alive. Wolves howled in the distance, and Ilara imagined their eyes were waiting to judge her. She clutched the small bag she was allowed to carry, the weight of it lighter than the burden on her heart. At night she huddled near the fire the guards made, listening to the snapping wood and the whisper of leaves, dreaming of a life where she could be valued, where her body and mind mattered. She did not know if such a life existed. Her father had turned away, her siblings had ignored her, and the world had a way of treating those who were different as less than nothing. The fortress of the Alpha King rose in the distance one evening, dark against the crimson sunset. Its towers pierced the sky like black spears, and the banners flapped silently in the wind. Guards in black armor led her to the main hall, their faces hidden beneath metal helms. Ilara's heart pounded in her chest. The tales of King Kale had reached even the farthest villages, a man who had conquered lands with sword and fire, a king who was feared even by his closest allies. The hall was vast and cold. Candles flickered along the stone walls, casting moving shadows that seemed to dance at the edges of her vision. At the far end, sitting on a throne carved from dark obsidian, was Kale. His presence alone commanded attention. Broad-shouldered, his hair black as midnight and eyes that burned like embers, he was exactly as the stories described, except far more alive, more dangerous, and more human than she expected. Kale's eyes swept over her as if she were a puzzle he intended to solve. There was no mockery, no disgust, just a quiet, piercing examination. Ilara felt her face flush. She wanted to shrink, to hide behind herself. "You are Ilara of Dunwyn," he said, his voice low and steady. "Sold by your family. Why should I care for your shame?" Ilara swallowed, finding her voice. I do not know, my lord. I only know that I was unwanted." Kyle leaned forward slightly, the firelight catching his sharp features. "Unwanted, yes. But worth something, perhaps. Tell me, girl, what is it that you fear most?" Her hands shook. "That I will be discarded as I have always been. That I will never matter to anyone." Kale's gaze softened ever so slightly. "Fear is a weight," he said. "But courage can turn it into strength. We shall see if you have any." For days she was tested in subtle ways. She was given impossible tasks: to organize the king's chaotic library, to tend to the gardens where the plants were said to respond only to the touch of the worthy. She failed at first, stumbling over words, knocking over vases, breaking stems. Yet Kale did not punish her harshly. Instead, he observed, sometimes smiling faintly at her clumsy determination. Ilara began to notice other things about him. The quiet moments when he stared at the moon from the balcony, as if seeking counsel from shadows, the way his hand twitched whenever a messenger delivered troubling news, the way he sometimes muttered to himself in a language she did not know, as if speaking to ghosts. One night, unable to sleep, she wandered the halls. The fortress seemed alive in a way that was both frightening and beautiful. Tapestries of ancient battles lined the walls. Candles flickered in sconces that looked as if they had not been cleaned for centuries. Her steps echoed softly as she neared the balcony and saw him there, staring at the horizon where the dark forests met the mountains. "Why do you look so haunted?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Kale's head turned slowly, and she expected anger. Instead, he looked at her with something deeper, something like recognition. "Haunted? Perhaps," he said. "Or perhaps burdened. The line between the two is thin." Ilara stepped closer. "I know what it is to be burdened. I have carried shame my whole life." "And yet you still walk," he said, his tone softening. "That is courage. Few have it." Her heart skipped. No one had ever spoken to her like this. Not with acknowledgement, not with respect. She did not understand the pull she felt toward him, a mix of fear, curiosity, and something she could not name. Days passed, and the tension between them grew. Kale would speak in riddles, asking her what she would do if the kingdom fell into darkness, or how she would decide between mercy and justice. Ilara struggled, often answering imperfectly, yet he seemed to value the thought behind her words. Slowly she realized that this man, who could command armies and strike fear into hearts, was testing her not for his amusement, but to see if she could rise above the world's cruelty, to see if she could become someone of worth. Then came the night of the storm. Lightning split the sky, thunder shaking the walls of the fortress. Ilara had been tending the library when she heard a scream echo through the halls. She ran, her heart hammering, and found Kale in the courtyard, surrounded by shadows that seemed to twist unnaturally. His sword was drawn, but his expression was grim. "Stay back," he ordered, yet his eyes flicked toward her. "You are not ready for this," but Ilara could not flee. She felt the fear in her chest transform into something stronger. Resolve. "I will not hide," she said. The shadows recoiled as if sensing her courage. Kyle's eyes widened and he struck with precision, banishing the dark shapes that threatened them. When the storm passed, silence fell over the courtyard, broken only by their heavy breaths. Kyle sheathed his sword and regarded her, his face unreadable. Then slowly he reached out and placed a small token in her hand, a pendant carved with a symbol she did not recognize. "You may yet be more than you know," he said. Alara stared at it, heart pounding. It was not just a gift, it was a sign, a claim, a promise, and for the first time in her life she felt seen, truly seen. As she returned to her room that night, the storm clearing and moonlight washing over the fortress walls, she held the pendant close. She knew that her journey had only begun. The Alpha King had not made her his queen yet, but she sensed that fate, cruel and dark though it was, had begun to weave her into his life. And somewhere deep inside, a spark of hope ignited. She would survive this fortress. She would rise. And perhaps, in the process, she would discover that she was not shame at all, but strength, courage, and worth waiting to be claimed. The wind whispered outside her window, carrying with it a promise she did not fully understand. Kale's eyes had seen her truth, and now the shadows of the fortress seemed less threatening. The token glimmered faintly as if alive, a reminder that even in darkness recognition and power could be found. And somewhere, deep in the halls of that cold fortress, Kale watched her. Not as a prisoner, not as a burden, but as someone who might one day stand beside him, not in shame, but as an equal. The night ended with the castle silent, the storm gone, and a new kind of tension settling over them both, a tension neither fear nor pride could explain. One that promised trials, transformations, and perhaps, if fate allowed, something far more dangerous and beautiful. A bond neither could have predicted. End of Part 1. Hook cliffhanger. Alara lay in bed clutching the pendant. She was exhausted, yet her heart was alive with a strange hope. Somewhere in the fortress, Kale's gaze lingered on her, and she knew, without understanding how, that tomorrow would bring more trials, more darkness, but also the possibility that she was no longer the girl who carried only shame. The real story, she realized, was only beginning.